Welcome to Whispers of Asia, where forgotten rituals, ancient curses, and haunted legends from across the East are brought back to life, not with screams, but with silence, and a voice that dares to remember what others have tried to forget. Tonight, we journey to the misty rice terraces of northern Luzon in the Philippines, where the moon does not just shine, it drinks. The villagers call it Inuman ng Buwan, the moon's drinking place, a still, flooded step where the full moon's reflection never leaves, even when the sky turns black. But this is no ordinary pool. It is where the moon descends to drink something far more precious than water, your memories. What happens when a village forgets its promise, when the moon grows thirsty and begins to feed on the mind of the living? Stay with me, and whatever you do, don't look too long into the water.
The rice terraces of northern Luzon are carved into the mountains like ribs of an ancient beast long buried beneath the soil. During the day, they shimmer with green life, curved like waves frozen in time. But at night, they become something else entirely, an enormous staircase leading up into the sky, where the moon waits like a silent witness. And if you stand still enough, if the wind holds its breath, you can hear it, the sound of water remembering footsteps that no longer exist. Mayadi had always been drawn to the highest terrace, the one her Lola called forbidden. It wasn't fenced, and no spirits rose from the soil to stop her, but every child in the village knew the rule without needing to be told. That terrace, the one that stayed flooded long after the planting season ended, was the moon's drinking place, Inuman ng Buwan, a name whispered with both reverence and fear. On the night of her 13th birthday, Mayadi slipped away from the house after her father fell asleep. The moon was full, pale and sharp like a cracked bowl of bone. She walked barefoot, the mud soft beneath her toes, the scent of wet earth clinging to her skin. The air was thick with fog, but she didn't hesitate. The path to the top was etched into her bones, like she had walked it in dreams she could no longer remember. When she reached the edge of the terrace, she stopped. The pool lay before her, still, perfect, untouched. It was as if the wind, the insects, even time itself refused to ripple its surface. And there, floating in the middle of the water, was the moon's reflection, so clear it seemed like a second moon had fallen from the sky and settled in the mountain's palm. Mayadi sat down, hugging her knees, staring into the pool. She didn't know what she expected. Maybe nothing, maybe everything. Her Lola used to say that the moon drinks from this place to keep our harvests alive, that it doesn't want our blood, it wants our memories, the ones too heavy to carry, the ones too painful to speak. Offer them freely, and the fields will flourish, but forget the offering, and the moon will take what it's owed. Nobody in the village believed that anymore. They had bigger things to worry about: pests, weather, broken machines, city prices. The rituals were gone, the songs were forgotten, the old ways left behind like the bones of ancestors buried beneath the terraces. And yet, here she was, staring into the pool that wasn't supposed to still exist. The clouds rolled in thick and fast, covering the sky, but the moon's reflection remained, unmoving, unyielding, burning softly like an eye that never blinked. Mayadi's breath hitched. She leaned forward. The air turned colder, her vision blurred. And then she heard it. A voice, not loud, not harsh, but deep and ancient, like a whisper carried through stone. It didn't speak in words, not at first. It sang, or perhaps it hummed, a tune that wrapped around her chest and made her heart beat slower, deeper, like it was being pulled into the earth. Then came the words, soft but heavy, as if the water itself was speaking. "You looked, now give me what you remember most." Mayari gasped. She scrambled back, feet splashing in the edge of the water, hands trembling. But the pool remained still. The reflection had not moved. The voice was gone. She turned and ran. The fields behind her were silent. No crickets, no wind, only the sound of her breath and the slap of her feet against the wet stone. She didn't look back. And in the flooded steppe she left behind, the moon drank, slowly, patiently, as it always had. The dry season came early that year. The rains that usually swept over the Cordillera Mountains in June vanished like a promise broken in silence. By July, the soil beneath the rice stalks cracked like skin left too long under the sun. Leaves curled inward, thirsty and thin. The irrigation ditches ran slower each day, their once lively trickling reduced to hollow echoes among stones. The elders muttered about it, of course. They always did, in that slow, resigned way that made their warnings feel more like quiet mourning than concern. "It's the wind," they said, "or the shifting sky, or the sin of modern life. Too much noise, too little offering." But nobody listened anymore, not really. There were no rituals, no songs at the terraces, no feasts beneath the stars. The only gods the villagers honored now were diesel engines and market prices. Mayari watched her father crouch by the field's edge, fingers digging into the brittle dirt. His brow was tight with worry, though he said nothing. He never spoke much since her mother died, but now he was almost silent. He would wake early, return late, eat slowly, and stare at the same patch of land as if willing it to change. One evening, as they sat by the fire, her father broke the quiet. "This land remembers," he said, his voice soft, brittle. "But I wonder if we still remember it." Mayari didn't answer. Her mind was still stuck on the pool from the night before, the way the reflection of the moon refused to fade, the voice that wasn't hers, the feeling that something ancient had awakened the moment she looked too long. She wanted to ask him about the terrace, about the legend, but she didn't know how. Words felt clumsy next to what she had seen. The next day, she noticed strange things, small at first. The neighbor's boy, barely 5, forgot his own name. He cried when his mother called him, insisting that wasn't who he was. Later that week, a man from the next barangay walked into the village asking for directions, only to realize he had lived there his entire life. The school teacher wrote the same sentence on the blackboard again and again, not realizing it, her hands trembling. Something was unraveling. It wasn't sudden, not loud, but like a slow leak from a sealed jar, memory began to drain from the village. Faces became unfamiliar, conversations repeated. The threads of daily life loosened in ways too quiet to measure until it was too late. And through it all, the fields remained dry. The crops withered. Even those who kept small backyard gardens saw their vegetables turn pale and bitter. The ground itself seemed to grow resentful, as if punishing the people who no longer remembered how to speak to it. At the barangay hall, the village head held a meeting. Few showed up, fewer still spoke. They blamed climate change, faulty irrigation, broken systems. Some blamed the mayor. Others whispered about curses, about forgotten rites. But no one dared to say the word. Inumen, the moon's drinking place. It lingered unspoken in their minds, like a locked room everyone pretended did not exist. Except for one person, Lola Kindara. She was nearly 100, skin as thin as parchment, and eyes clouded with milky blue, but her voice still carried when she chose to speak. "It's not the land that forgot us," she said loud and clear from her bamboo chair near the fire. "It's us who forgot the land, and the moon does not forget forgetting." They laughed nervously. Some rolled their eyes, but Mayari felt something chill in her bones at those words. She could still hear the echo of that whisper from the terrace. "Now give me what you remember most." Later, that night, while others slept, she wandered again toward the flooded terrace. The path was darker this time, no stars. The moon had not yet risen, but she could feel it, waiting, not above, but below, beneath the water. When she reached the edge, she saw the pool was still perfectly full, and in it, though the sky was empty, the moon was already there.
The moon had not risen, and yet it was already there. Mayari stood at the edge of the flooded terrace, feet half sunken in the cool mud, her breath held between disbelief and dread. The sky above was a deep slate gray, thick with cloud. Not a single star pierced the darkness, but in the center of the water, calm and impossibly clear, the reflection of the full moon shone bright as bone. It didn't waver, it didn't shift, it simply watched. She stepped closer, one careful foot at a time, until her toes touched the glassy surface. The light from the pool painted her face pale, like she had been drained of something. Her shadow stretched long behind her, even though there was no source of light to cast it. The air around the terrace felt different now. Not cold, but still, unnaturally so. Even the frogs had stopped their nightly songs. No crickets, no rustling, just the faint sound of water breathing. She crouched down slowly, eyes locked on the reflection. It was perfect, too perfect. Every crater, every soft shadow of the lunar surface seemed more detailed than it had any right to be, more vivid than the real moon she remembered seeing as a child. Then, something flickered. A ripple. No, a blink. Mayari jerked backward. Her heart pounded. She looked up at the sky, then back at the water. The moon above still hadn't risen, but its reflection remained, steady, unbothered, as if it had never moved at all. And then it changed. From the depths of the pool, something began to form. Not a shape, not yet, but a suggestion. The shimmer of something shifting just beneath the surface, like a second image trying to break through the mirror. A voice rose, not out loud, not in her ears, but inside. Soft, old, familiar in a way that made her chest ache. You looked again. Mayari's throat tightened, her knees weakened. You returned. What will you give me now? The question wrapped itself around her bones. She wanted to speak, wanted to say she didn't understand, that she hadn't agreed to anything. But deep inside, she knew that wasn't true. The moment she stepped toward the pool, the moment she stared too long, something ancient had marked her, something hungry. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. Instead, memories began to rise. She saw her mother brushing her hair in the morning sun, singing softly. She saw the bowl of chicken tinola steaming on a rainy day, the calloused hands that once held hers while crossing the muddy paths after school. The pool rippled gently. These. The word wasn't spoken. It was felt, as if the moon itself reached into her with delicate, icy fingers. These are warm. These are whole. Let me drink them. No, she whispered.
The water stilled, but the reflection remained. "Give me what you remember most." "No," she said again, louder this time. Then she ran. The fog clung to her skin like a wet shroud, her breath caught in her throat. The forest seemed deeper now, the path less clear. She stumbled once, then again, the roots and stones reaching for her like unseen hands. Behind her, she did not hear footsteps, but she did hear the water, a faint lapping sound, as if something was drinking, not from a stream, but from her. She burst into the clearing near her home, just as the real moon began to rise, pale and slow over the horizon. She didn't wait to see if the reflection matched. She collapsed into her mat, eyes wide open, heart thundering beneath her ribs. And as she drifted into sleep, not from peace, but from exhaustion, one final thought whispered through her skull like wind across a still lake. The moon has begun to drink, and it remembers her name.
The forgetting began slowly, not with a scream, not with panic, but with a name. It was Lola Tindara who first noticed. One morning she called to her granddaughter, the one who lived with her, who brought her rice water every dawn. But when she tried to say her name, her lips faltered. She could see the child's face clearly in her mind. She could even feel the girl's small hand tugging at her skirt. But the name was gone. She laughed it off at first. "Old age," she said, "fog in the brain." But when the same thing happened the next morning, and the one after, her smile faded. She started writing names down, hers, the child's, her dead husband's. But even her own handwriting looked strange, foreign, as if someone else had written it years ago. In the schoolhouse, a boy forgot how to spell his surname. Then, the next day, he forgot it entirely. The day after that, he didn't know his parents' faces. He cried when they touched him, cried until his voice cracked and vanished into silence. The barangay captain forgot how many children he had, then forgot he had any at all. Even the dogs, once loyal to familiar voices, began growling at their owners as if facing strangers. It spread like water and cracked earth, silent, invisible, irreversible. Not every case was sudden. Some villagers only lost small things, the color of their own door, the taste of mangoes, the layout of their homes. But others, they forgot their way back from the fields. They forgot how to cook. They forgot why they were holding the tools in their hands. And always, they forgot it had happened before. It was Mayadi who started keeping a list. She found an old notebook buried in a chest, pages yellowed and brittle. She began writing down everything she could still remember: her name, her father's name, her mother's favorite flower, the lullaby her Lola used to hum. But even as she wrote, a strange pressure curled around her thoughts, like something unseen leaning in close, reading over her shoulder. At night, she dreamed of water, not flowing, but still, always still. And in it, her own reflection changed, her eyes blank, her mouth open in a silent scream. And behind her, the moon hovered, impossibly large, impossibly near. When she woke, her hands were cold, her pillow damp with tears she didn't remember crying. One evening, her father forgot the word for fire. They were sitting by it, the embers glowing softly between them. He reached out, pointing at the flames with confusion in his eyes. "What is this again?" he asked. Mayadi stared at him. "You're joking," she said, half laughing. He shook his head.
It's warm, it's good, but I can't say it. That night, he forgot to lock the door. 2 days later, the woman who sold dried fish forgot how to count. Her scale tilted empty as she stared blankly at the coins in her hand. The priest forgot the Lord's Prayer. The nurse forgot how to use a thermometer. The babies forgot how to cry. And somewhere, in the flooded terrace high above, the moon's reflection remained, bright, full, never wavering, watching, drinking. Some people began to avoid the terrace completely. Others claimed they saw things there, shimmering shapes bending over the water. Not people, not quite spirits, reflections that moved when nothing stood above them. Someone threw a stone into the pool once. The next day he forgot his own face in the mirror. Mayari said nothing. She simply watched the list of names and memories shrink with each passing day, watched the hollow space behind people's eyes grow wider, watched the world unravel in slow, quiet pieces, until the forgetting came for her too. She was brushing her hair when it happened. She paused mid-stroke, confused. Why was she crying? The tears were warm, but she didn't remember the reason. She couldn't remember the dream. Only the water. Always the water.
It began with whispers, not words, not voices, but something softer, like the sound of pages turning underwater. The villagers said they only heard it near the flooded steppe, especially on nights when the moon was full. A sound that didn't echo, didn't rise or fall. It simply pressed against the ears like wet hands covering your face. Mayari first noticed them 3 nights after she forgot her mother's voice. She had gone to the terrace again, not by choice, but by something closer to instinct. Her feet moved before her thoughts. Her body knew the way, even when her mind did not. The sky was overcast. The air held the taste of damp stone. And yet, as always, the moon was already waiting in the pool, shining, still. But this time, she wasn't alone. At the far edge of the water, something moved. It was a figure, human in shape, but not in presence. There was no face, no skin, no weight, just light. Pale silver and flickering like mist, caught in a breeze that didn't exist. It knelt by the edge of the pool, its head bowed low, hands resting on the water's surface, drinking. Not like a person drinks, more like a memory sipped through silence. Then another appeared, and another. Dozens. Each one a mirror, bent forward, mouths that weren't mouths touching the reflection. Not splashing, not disturbing, just drinking, endlessly. Mayari's heart thudded in her chest. She crouched behind a tree, breath held tight in her lungs. She wanted to run, but her legs refused. She wanted to scream, but her throat felt hollow. The moon's reflection remained untouched, even with the shapes surrounding it. If anything, it seemed brighter, more vivid, as if growing stronger with each silent sip. Then one of the figures turned. Not its head. There was no face to turn, but its entire form pivoted slowly, and Mayari knew, without reason, without proof, that it was looking at her. She didn't move. She couldn't. The figure stood. It did not walk. It hovered, slid,
glided across the stone path with a motion too smooth to be real. Its limbs shimmered like fabric soaked in starlight, its outline pulsing gently with something that was not breath, but rhythm. It stopped only a few meters from her, then tilted forward, and she saw it. Its chest. Where a heart should be, there was a hollow. And inside that hollow, a picture. Her picture. A drawing she made when she was 6, crude, childish, but undeniably hers. A little girl with 2 braids and a crooked smile holding her mother's hand. It had once hung on the wall above her mat. Now it was glowing inside the creature's chest, like a memory turned into fire. Mayari gasped. The creature tilted its head. From behind it, the others began to rise, their bodies elongating, shifting, stretching like wet shadows peeling off glass. Some held objects inside their chests, a shoe, a name tag, a diary page. Memories, all of them. Not stolen, taken. Freely or not, it no longer mattered. The first figure leaned close, and from within its formless shape came a whisper, not sound, not voice, but something that entered her mind like a cold wind crawling through a cracked window. You gave us nothing, but you looked, and so we drank. Mayari stumbled backward. The figures did not follow. They simply turned away, one by one, and bent once more toward the water. Drinking, drinking, drinking. She ran until her lungs burned, until the stars blurred, until the sound of her own heartbeat drowned out the whispers. When she reached the edge of the village, she collapsed near the well. An old woman found her there at dawn, curled in the dirt, clutching her chest like something had been pulled from it. She didn't speak for 2 days, and when she finally did, her voice was quieter, slower, as if something inside her had been hollowed out. That night, someone else went missing. The only trace left behind was a small shoe, floating in the moon's drinking place. Dry. Perfectly dry. He arrived in the village barefoot. His clothes were soaked, but there had been no rain. His hair dripped with water that shimmered faintly, even under the dull morning light. It clung to his skin like oil, refusing to evaporate, soaking into his footprints as if trying to return to the earth. Nobody knew him. He said nothing. At first, the villagers thought he was a lost traveler, a migrant, perhaps a drifter from one of the neighboring mountains. But when they asked him his name, he simply stared at them, confused, not afraid, not angry, just empty. They brought him to the barangay hall, wrapped a towel around his shoulders, offered him food. He ate with both hands, fast but not desperate, like someone who didn't know the meaning of hunger, but followed the instinct of it. When the captain asked again, "What's your name?" the man furrowed his brow, thought, struggled, then opened his mouth to answer, but no sound came out, only silence. The captain tried again, slower this time. "Where are you from?" Nothing. "What's the last thing you remember?" The man blinked, then his lips moved. "I was standing at the water," he said. His voice was dry, wrong, like words pushed through a throat that didn't know how to shape them. "What water?" "The moon's," he said. "It asked me." That was all. He couldn't remember his family, his town, his age. even his language began to collapse. Words came out twisted. Basic sentences fell apart like brittle leaves in his mouth. Soon he couldn't speak at all. They kept him in the old health station, where the windows had long since fogged over and the floor was lined with unused mats. Mayari went to see him once out of something she wasn't sure was curiosity or dread. He sat in the corner, eyes unfocused, head slightly tilted as if still listening to something only he could hear. On the wall above his bed, he had drawn something, not with ink, with mud, a perfect circle. Inside it, two small shapes bent toward the center, like heads lowered in prayer or thirst. He didn't draw anything else, didn't speak again, didn't eat, didn't sleep, just sat. And sometimes at night, he would whisper, not words, but sounds, long, slow hums that rose and fell like water lapping gently against stone. It was rhythm more than language, the kind of sound you'd hear not with your ears, but with your bones. The villagers began calling him Walang Pangalan, no name, not out of cruelty, but because they were afraid to give him one. To name something is to claim it, and nobody wanted to claim this. One morning, he was gone. No door opened, no tracks led away. The only thing left behind was the circle on the wall, smudged and wet, as if someone had tried to drink it. After that, others began to forget more quickly. A woman forgot the day she gave birth. The memory vanished from her mind like smoke in wind. Her child played at her feet, and she stared at the girl like she was a stranger. A farmer woke up screaming, convinced he was buried alive. He clawed at his own face, trying to remember who it belonged to. A boy drew a picture of his family, just outlines, faceless and blurred, and cried when he realized he couldn't recall the sound of their laughter. And in the silence that grew between every conversation, every moment of confusion, one thought lingered in the minds of those still clinging to memory. The moon is still drinking, and it no longer waits for permission. There was a story the old ones used to tell. Before televisions, before radios, before the terraces were photographed by tourists in hiking boots and plastic ponchos. It was whispered during typhoons, when the roofs creaked and the wind howled like voices from the mountain. The children would huddle near the fire, eyes wide, as the elders leaned in and said, "Do not forget what must be remembered, or you will be remembered by what should have been forgotten." No one told that story anymore, except one, Lola Tindara. She sat beneath the same tree every afternoon, weaving nothing with her hands, as if still working with threads long lost. Her mind was fragile, slipping in and out like the tide, but some days the past came back like a wave, crashing through her eyes with terrible clarity. Mayari visited her after the man with no name disappeared. She didn't know what she was looking for. Maybe proof. Maybe permission to be afraid. Lola looked up at her without blinking. "You've seen them," she said, before Mayari spoke a word. Mayari hesitated. "They drink," she whispered. Lola nodded. "The moon doesn't just pull tides, it pulls memory. Blood is too loud, pain is too brief, but memory, that lingers, that hums." She reached into a rusted box at her feet and pulled out something wrapped in banana leaves. Slowly, carefully, she unwrapped it. Inside was an old mask, wooden, cracked, painted with white ash and indigo. It had no eyes,
only a mouth, open wide in silence. "This was worn by the memory givers," she said, "long ago, before churches, before the forgetting began." Mayari stared at it, unease crawling down her spine. "What did they give?" she asked. "Grief, guilt, regret, the memories that make the chest heavy. They offered them to the moon, so the land would not carry that weight. In return, the moon made things grow, made the rice sweet, the children strong." Mayari touched the mask. The wood was cool, too cool. But what if the offering stopped? Lola did not answer at first. She only looked toward the hills, toward the place where the flooded terrace waited. Then she whispered, "Then the moon grows hungry. It wanders, it takes, but it does not punish quickly. No, it begins with names, then faces, then voices, until the bones forget how to carry breath." Mayari felt a tightness in her throat. Can it be stopped? No. But it can be fed. She handed the mask to Mayari. Someone must remember how to forget properly, willingly, with reverence. Mayari held the mask in both hands. It was light, and yet somehow unbearable. She felt the air shift, the ground hum. Lola leaned closer, her eyes no longer cloudy, but sharp as cracked obsidian. "Do not let the moon choose what to take." She closed Mayari's fingers around the mask. "Choose for it, or it will eat everything." That night, Mayari did not sleep. She sat by the doorway, staring at the mask, and far above, the clouds parted, not to reveal the moon, but its reflection, glowing, patient, waiting.
The dreams began the next night. Not nightmares, not visions, just presence. Soft, slow, silver. Mayari lay beneath her blanket, eyes closed, but her mind awake, too awake. It felt like something was watching her from the inside, as if her thoughts had grown glass walls and something beyond them was peering in. At first, it was only mist, endless, weightless. She wandered through it barefoot, unable to tell if she was walking on air, stone, or water. The world had no edges, no sky, no horizon, only white. And then a sound, not loud, not sharp, a hum. It vibrated through her bones, through the back of her teeth, through the soles of her feet. A melody without music, a rhythm without beat. It was language, but not spoken. And in the center of the mist, a circle of water waited, still, endless. She knelt beside it, not knowing why. Her own reflection stared back, but her eyes and the water were different. They were wide, empty, and crying. Then came the whisper, "You remember too much." Mayari tried to speak, but no sound came. "You keep what others throw away, grief, guilt, names that ache, faces that vanish." The voice echoed without echo. It felt like breath on her neck, cold, lingering. "Give them to me." She shook her head. The mist thickened, swirled around her. She felt weightless again, until suddenly she wasn't. Her knees struck stone, her hands hit mud, her breath fogged the mirror-like surface of the pool, and she knew. She was no longer dreaming. She was awake, outside her house, at the edge of the flooded terraces, the real one. The mask clutched in her hands. She didn't remember getting up, didn't remember walking, but the pool was there, and above it, the sky was covered in cloud. Yet the moon's reflection gleamed beneath her like an open eye. She rose to her feet slowly. Her head buzzed, her hands trembled. The mask felt heavier now. She looked down, and there it was again, her reflection. But this time, her face wasn't alone. Beside her own reflection, another reflection hovered, pale, featureless, bent low toward the water. It did not move, did not breathe, but it whispered, "Let me drink what you cannot carry." Mayari stepped back. The reflection did not follow, but the voice did. Inside her, around her, under her skin. "Give me what you remember most." Her heart pounded. She turned and ran. The mist swallowed her footsteps. When she reached home, the mask was gone. She didn't know if she had dropped it or given it. She didn't know which frightened her more. The next morning, her father forgot the name of the village. When she told him, he asked, "Is that where we live?" And when she nodded, he smiled faintly, as if hearing it for the first time. That evening, a thick fog rolled in early, too early. By sunset, the entire barangay was shrouded in white. From somewhere up the mountain, someone swore they heard a song, but no one was singing. And all across the terraces, the reflection of the moon began to ripple, as if something beneath it had started to move.
The masks were buried beneath the church, hidden under cracked tiles, behind the altar no one touched anymore. The building itself had not seen a full service in years, its pews eaten by termites, its windows clouded with dust, its bell rusted into silence. But it was still locked every night, as if even the abandoned could hold secrets. Mayari found the key in her Lola's chest. It was wrapped in an old piece of cloth, along with a folded note written in Baybayin, the ancient script only a few elders could still read. The ink was smudged, faded by time and damp, but one phrase stood out, written in uneven strokes at the bottom. "Do not wear the eyes. Let the moon see what you cannot." She entered the church at dusk, alone. The wooden door creaked open with a moan like something exhaled. Dust danced in the amber light, swirling like spirits too tired to haunt. She moved through the pews slowly, feet echoing in the hollow space. The air was stale, still, but beneath it she could feel something watching, not from the shadows, but from below. The floor behind the altar was loose. She pried it up with the rusted edge of a broken candle holder. Beneath the rotting wood was a cavity filled with old straw, dried leaves, and woven cloth that cracked like paper. And inside them, masks. Dozens. Each one carved from dark wood, smooth, seamless, and eyeless. Their surfaces were adorned with intricate symbols, circles, spirals, patterns that mirrored the shapes etched in the terraces during planting season. Their mouths were open, but not in screams, open like they were breathing or whispering. Mayari lifted one gently. It was lighter than she expected, as if time had hollowed it out from within. She held it to her face, and everything changed. She saw the terrace, not now, but long ago, alive with torches, with song, with people dressed in white and indigo, standing in silence as masked figures knelt by the edge of the moon's drinking place. There were no words, no prayers, just memory,
pouring from the masked ones like smoke rising from skin. She saw a man weeping as he placed a small bundle in the water, a woman shaking as she held out a necklace made of hair, a child no older than she was, lifting the mask with both hands before disappearing into the mist. And above them all, the moon reflected perfectly, unmoving, like a god watching through water. Then, the vision broke. Mayari staggered back, breath shallow. She tore the mask from her face, chest tight, skin cold, but the images remained, burned into her mind like the sun behind closed eyes. The mask had shown her the truth. The old rituals were not superstition. They were a contract, a trade, memory given willingly in exchange for mercy. The masks without eyes meant surrender. To wear one was to say, I do not choose what I forget, only that I forget for all of us. And now, no one wore them. The moon was no longer fed by devotion. It had begun to feed by force. Mayari gathered 3 of the masks, wrapping them in the cloth from Lola's chest. As she did, she noticed something strange. One of the masks was damp, not from rain, but from something colder. It smelled faintly of the terrace, of the pool, of the moon. That night she placed the damp mask by her bed, and when she dreamed, she stood not in the mist, but in the water, knee-deep, the moon above her, and in front of her, a figure wearing a mask with no eyes. It lifted a hand and pointed to her chest. She looked down and saw the outline of her mother's smile glowing beneath her skin.
The first one was a child, barely 3 years old. Her name was Lena. Her laughter had once echoed through the terraces, bright and defiant against the silence. She had been one of the few who still laughed at all, until the morning she didn't wake up. Her mother found her curled on the mat, face peaceful, body warm, but unmoving. There were no signs of illness, no bruises, no fever, no struggle, just stillness. The healers said her heart was strong, her lungs had no fluid, nothing was broken, nothing was wrong, except she had simply stopped breathing. Not in her sleep, not suddenly, but gradually, like her body had simply forgotten how. Within a week, it happened again, then again. A man sharpening a bolo in the fields collapsed forward mid-motion. When they rolled him over, his eyes were wide open, terrified, his mouth frozen in a silent gasp. His hands clutched the air like he'd tried to catch the breath slipping from him. The doctor from the next town was called. He couldn't explain it. He left before dark. The village fell into a hush deeper than grief. It was fear now, thick, pervasive. Every cough sounded like a warning, every yawn like a risk. Mothers began sleeping with their hands on their children's chests, counting the rise and fall. Some stopped sleeping altogether. But the forgetting did not stop. In fact, it changed. People no longer forgot just names or faces. They forgot how to chew, how to swallow. A woman stood for hours in front of a bowl of food, mouth open, unable to remember what to do. Her daughter had to guide her hands, press the spoon against her lips. She cried, not from pain, but from shame. Mayari watched it unfold like a dream unraveling. She kept the masks hidden beneath her mat. Every night she placed one beside her pillow. And every night the dreams grew stranger. No more mist, only water, always water. She stood waist-deep in it now, surrounded by figures with no faces, no mouths, only holes where breath should be. They did not speak, they stared. And in the center of the pool floated a single child, Lena. Her eyes were open, her chest still, and above her, the moon pulsed like a slow drum. When Mayari woke, her throat was tight, her lips dry. For a moment, she couldn't remember how to inhale. Panic rose, but then the air came, sharp and sudden, like being yanked back into her body. She sat up, gasping. Outside, the wind had died. No birds sang, no dogs barked. The world held its breath, and the moon's drinking place shone brighter than ever before, its surface gleaming not like water, but like glass polished by centuries of sorrow. At dawn, they buried 3 more. No funerals, no chants, no goodbyes. No one could remember the old words. The priest had stopped trying. His voice now shook even when he read from the Bible. He once tried to recite the Lord's Prayer and forgot it halfway through. Instead of starting over, he simply closed the book and walked away. That evening, a man named Ernan climbed to the terrace alone. He left a note, 1 line: "I will give what I cannot carry anymore." They found his sandals by the pool the next morning, but not him. Only a ripple in the water, and a reflection. 2 moons, one in the sky and one in the water. Both watching, both drinking. And from that night on, nobody in the village breathed too deeply, as if fearing the air itself might be forgotten next.
The attic above Lola Tendara's hut had not been opened in years. Its trapdoor groaned when Mayari pushed it open, spewing dust into her face. Cobwebs clung to her arms like threads spun by the forgotten. Light slanted in from the roof's broken slats, revealing a space filled with old baskets, dried herbs, mats rolled tight with age, and the scent of mold and memory. She wasn't sure what had brought her there. Only a pull, quiet, persistent, like a whisper too soft to hear but too heavy to ignore. She sifted through the clutter slowly, carefully. Everything felt fragile, as if time itself would shatter if touched too fast. Then she found it. Tucked beneath a collapsed rice winnower, wrapped in layers of woven abaka, tied shut with faded red thread. It wasn't a book, not in the way Mayari understood. No pages, no spine, just tightly pressed banana leaves, cured and inked, folded like accordion lungs. The edges were brittle, but the ink, charcoal mixed with oil and crushed betel nut, still clung to the surface like veins etched by fire. She carried it downstairs with reverence. By the firelight, she unfolded it, section by section. The first leaf bore a single symbol, a circle within a circle, surrounded by open mouths. She recognized it. It was the mark carved onto the eyeless masks. She turned the next fold. Words by Bayin, inked in practiced strokes. The language was old, formal, not meant for speaking aloud. A script written for memory, not sound. But Lola had taught her enough. She began to read. Ritual of the Moon's Offering. Step 1. Ugtug Ilyi, the calling. A chosen one must descend to the moon's drinking place alone, at midnight, barefoot, masked. They must bring with them one memory wrapped in sacred fiber, an object, a scent, a name. The offering must be held close to the heart. The moon will reflect the truth of it. If accepted, the water will ripple without wind, Step 2. Parang-an, the giving. The offering must be submerged while the memory is silently recalled. No words, no tears. The memory must be felt fully, then released. The giver must not look away. If the water drinks it, it will grow cold. If it rejects it, it will burn. Step 3. Limus, the forgetting. The masked one will leave without the memory. It will not return. It cannot be reclaimed. Others may begin to heal. If the ritual is broken mid-offering, the moon will hunger more deeply. There was more: songs, markings, diagrams of body positions. But the ink grew fainter, warped by age. One corner had been singed, as if once touched by fire. At the very bottom of the final fold, in shakier handwriting, a warning: do not offer joy, do not offer love. Only grief may be given, only sorrow may be safely swallowed. Mayari sat in silence for a long time. Outside, the wind had returned, but it no longer rustled the trees. It passed through the village like a cold breath through hollow reeds, the kind of wind that carried memory away instead of bringing it back. She thought of her mother's laughter, her father's voice when he still sang while planting rice, the feeling of safety when she was small, held close during storms. She could not give those. She would not. But she thought of the morning her mother died, of the ache that had never left her chest, of the years of silence in her home, of the loneliness that clung to her like shadow. She closed the book. She knew what she had to do.
It was supposed to be just another harvest errand. Hernan had gone up early, carrying his worn sickle and a bundle of rope. The sky was still bruised with dawn, the fog hanging low across the slopes. The air had that faint sweetness of wet leaves and rot, normal for the season, almost comforting. He never came back. When they found him, it was already afternoon. His body lay twisted near the highest step, just above the moon's drinking place. His sickle had snapped in two. His skull had cracked against the stone. But there were no signs of struggle, no broken rocks, no sign he had slipped. Only blood. A thin line of it, dark, still, flowing slowly, unnaturally, down the baktang, seeping into each level like a quiet offering. It moved with a mind of its own, not soaking into the soil, but gliding over it. It reached the flooded step and stopped at the edge of the pool. It did not spread, it did not ripple, it just hovered, waiting. Mayari arrived as the villagers stood in silence, unsure whether to pray or flee. Her breath caught as she stepped closer. The blood hadn't dried. It gleamed in the fading light, thick as syrup, as if time itself refused to move past this moment. Then she looked at the water. The reflection of the moon was wrong. Not gone, not hidden, twisted. Instead of a perfect circle, it pulsed, warped, as if the pool no longer knew what a moon was supposed to look like. The light bent, elongating at the edges, almost as if it were trying to escape its own shape. Lola Tindara arrived late, carried on a bamboo stretcher by two quiet men. When she saw the blood, she did not speak. When she saw the reflection, she did not cry. She only closed her eyes and whispered one word: rejected. The villagers turned toward her, confused. She continued, voice slow, low, like a chant cracked by age. The terraces were once sacred. To bleed upon them was an offering. But now it is trespass. The moon no longer accepts what we give by accident. It wants what is chosen. They asked her what that meant. She said nothing more. That night, Hernan was buried without ceremony.
His mother didn't speak. His brother forgot how to dig halfway through the process, staring at the shovel in his hands as if it were something he'd never seen before. No one dared sleep. Mayari stood by her window until the fog thickened and the stars disappeared. She watched the light from the pool flicker in the distance. She thought about the book, the warning. Only sorrow may be safely swallowed. And suddenly, she knew. Hernan had tried to give something, but not grief, not regret. He had given his body, his blood, his life. But the moon didn't want sacrifice. It wanted memory. It wanted what hurt to remember. And Hernan died with his secret sealed, not offered, just lost. The moon had spat him out, and now it was hungrier. The next morning, the pool was fuller again, the reflection stable. But the air around it was colder, sharper, as if something had finally woken up.
It was just there. One morning, standing on the edge of a path no one had used in years, nestled between two moss-covered trees, a house. Not newly built, not ancient. Somewhere in between, like it had been lived in long enough to fade, but not long enough to rot. The villagers found it by accident. A group of men were searching for an old irrigation channel when one of them stumbled out of the underbrush and froze. The others followed and then stopped too. There were no footsteps leading to it, no trail, no map ever marked it. But there it stood, quiet, small, and waiting. Single floor, thatched roof, a bamboo door bound with red twine. No windows, no smoke, no sound. When asked, no one could remember it ever existing. Not even the elders, not even Lola Tandana. And yet, when they looked at it, it felt familiar. Not in the way you remember something clearly, but like a dream you wake from and swear was real. Mayari came that afternoon. She didn't ask questions, she didn't hesitate. She simply walked toward it as if pulled by gravity. The others warned her not to go near, but she only looked back once, eyes calm, and said, "If no one remembers opening it, maybe it's waiting to be closed." Then she stepped inside. The house was silent, dustless, cool. The air felt thick, not with heat, but with stillness, like everything inside had been paused mid-thought. The first thing she noticed was the floor, woven mats arranged in a spiral. At the center, a small basin of water, perfectly still, reflecting a moon that was not in the sky. It pulsed, light without source, memory without time. And above it, hanging from the rafters, dozens of objects dangled on thin strings, each one softly spinning in air that did not move. A child's shoe, a lock of hair, a broken bracelet, a burned-out candle stub, a drawing on crumpled paper, a ribbon, a button, a name tag. Each one glowed faintly, like memory captured and strung up like wind chimes of the forgotten. Mayari stepped toward the basin. Her reflection met her, then changed. It was still her face, but younger, eyes full of a sorrow she had not yet known. And behind that younger self, a door, identical to the one she had just entered, stood ajar, and in its crack, something shimmered. A figure, not a person, not a shadow, a suggestion. She reached toward the water, but before her fingers could touch it, the door behind her slammed shut. Darkness, a hum, then a voice. Not the moon's,
a voice like her own, but older, worn, tired. Some doors open when too many are closed. She turned, and the door was open again. Outside, the trees were swaying, the villagers gone, the path gone. Only the house remained. She stepped out, clutching something in her hand. She didn't remember picking it up. It was a piece of thread, red, still warm, still trembling. When she turned around, the house was gone. No walls, no door, only trees, only silence, only a faint scent of water in the air, like something had breathed and disappeared. She looked down at her hand. The thread was now tied in a loop, a bracelet, but she had no memory of ever wearing one. That night, she dreamed of herself walking through the village, knocking on doors, asking names, and no one answered because no one remembered how to speak.
They found her in the graveyard at dawn, not asleep, not awake, just still. Her eyes were open, glazed with dew, her skin cold, but not lifeless, her breath shallow but present. She sat between two forgotten graves, both marked only by stones with no names, just the faint outline of letters long washed away by time and rain. When they asked what she was doing, she didn't answer. Not at first. She was listening, because that was where the voices were the loudest. They didn't scream, they didn't groan, they whispered, like cracked paper, like smoke moving through branches, not in words, but in memories. She stood slowly and spoke, not to the villagers, but to something they could not see. "I remember you," she said, and the wind shifted. That night, she returned alone. She brought nothing but the red thread still tied around her wrist and the damp mask she had hidden beneath her mat. She walked past the edge of the cemetery, deeper into the woods, where the graves no longer had shape, just depressions in the earth, like the land had breathed in and never exhaled. There, beneath the boughs of a dying balete tree, the air thinned, and they came. They didn't walk, they hovered. Figures made of suggestion, outlines barely visible, bodies shaped by fragments of memory. A hand, a mouth, a tear, a child's laugh echoing with no source. Each of them wore nothing, needed nothing, but they circled her like water drawn to gravity. One stepped closer. It had no face, but it had a scent. Sampaguita. Mayari's breath caught. She knew that smell. Her neighbor. The old woman who braided flowers every morning and had vanished without a sound last week. The spirit reached out a hand, not to touch, but to offer. And in that moment, Mayari understood. They were not hungry. They were not lost. They were waiting for someone to remember. Not all of them had been taken in violence or silence. Some had wandered too far. Others had offered too late. Some had forgotten themselves before the moon ever reached them. But their memories still lingered, unanchored, unnamed. She knelt, pressed her forehead to the ground, and whispered, "Tell me." One by one they came. Each gave her something, a song half remembered, a lullaby with no words, a look of love that had never been returned, a prayer abandoned mid-sentence, a secret kept too long. Each memory bloomed inside her like smoke in her chest. She felt herself filling,
layer upon layer of sorrow, of joy, of things never said. It burned, it swelled, it ached, but she did not stop, because someone had to carry them. Someone had to offer them. As she stood to leave, the spirits began to vanish, dissolving into the fog like dew into fire. All except one, a small figure, child-sized, wearing no face, but humming. The tune was familiar, the lullaby her mother used to hum. She stepped forward. "Who are you?" Mayari asked, voice trembling. The figure tilted its head, then slowly reached out and touched her wrist, and the red thread fell to the ground, untied. When she looked back up, the spirit was gone, but the song continued in her ears, all the way down the mountain. She chose the night of the full moon, not because it was tradition, no one remembered the old calendar, but because the pool had begun to glow long before the sky darkened. It called her, not in words, not even in dreams, just presence, a weight behind her ribs, a tide rising in her blood. Mayari walked alone. No one saw her leave. No one followed. They were too busy forgetting. Names, birthdays, the difference between dreams and waking. She wore a white wrap, stitched from her mother's old shawl. Around her wrist, she tied the broken red thread, now soaked in river water. And in her hands, wrapped in banana leaf and silence, she carried her offering. A single photograph, faded, bent at the corners. It showed a girl, herself, maybe 5 years old, sitting on her mother's lap beneath the old jackfruit tree. Her mother's smile was soft, tilted, caught mid-laugh. One of those smiles you don't pose for, the kind that only lives in memory. She hadn't looked at the photo in years, but the moment she found it behind the altar, something inside her had cracked open. Because this was the memory she never wanted to lose, which meant it was the one she had to give. She reached the flooded terrace just as the moon reached the center of the sky. The water was flat, still, blinding. She stepped in barefoot, as the ritual required. The cold bit her skin. Each ripple echoed like a bell under her bones. She stopped at the center, where the stone platform rose just beneath the surface, the place her ancestors once knelt. And she did the same, knees submerged, hands trembling. She unwrapped the banana leaf, held the photograph to her chest, and closed her eyes. The memory came. The scent of jackfruit, the rustle of birds in the afternoon heat, her mother's arms warm around her. A song hummed against her ear. That feeling of being entirely, completely safe, loved, whole. Her chest tightened. Tears came, silent and slow. She let the memory bloom fully. Then gently, achingly, she placed the photograph on the water. It floated. The moon's reflection shimmered, then rippled, just once, like breath. The water grew cold, painfully cold. A sign. Accepted. She waited, not for words, but for silence, the kind that settles when something sacred has been seen. And then she forgot. Not everything, just one thing, but it was enough to make her gasp. She looked down at the photo, but she could no longer recall the woman's name, or the song, or the arms, or the warmth. She stared at the smile and saw only a stranger. But the water was still now, still and quiet and full. Behind her, the night wind stirred the trees again. Somewhere in the village, a child remembered her mother's lullaby. A man woke and said his wife's name for the first time in days. A dog barked joyfully at its master, recognizing the sound of his footsteps. The forgetting had slowed, not stopped, but eased. The moon had been fed, and it was enough for now. Mayari rose, left the mask behind, walked back, barefoot, lighter, hollow. And as she passed through the sleeping village, no one saw her, no one called her name, and for the first time she didn't mind, because someone had to carry the silence so that others could remember. The moon rose in silence. No bells rang, no birds sang, no dogs barked. It simply climbed the sky like a ghost returning to its post. But this time, the pool remained dark, still, flat, blank. The villagers noticed first, with confusion, then with awe. Some whispered blessings, others crossed themselves. A few dared climb to the flooded step, but found only water. No light, no reflection, only the surface, calm as breath held too long. Someone joked that the moon had finally fallen asleep, but the elders knew better. Lola Kendara, though frail and nearly blind, stood beneath the balete tree and whispered, "It is full, it is fed." For the first time in weeks, the children remembered their songs. A man recalled his sister's face. A woman laughed and wept as her newborn said her name. The world was still broken, but no longer unraveling. The forgetting had loosened its grip, as if something vast had eaten its fill and gone quiet. Mayari did not return, not to her home, not to the terrace. Her father searched once, found only her sandals beside the path. He placed them by the doorway and waited, but she did not come. Days passed, then weeks. The pool remained dark, and the villagers slowly, quietly resumed their lives. They dared not speak of what happened, not out of fear, but reverence, because some things should not be named after they are given. One evening, as the light faded from the hills, a child walked up to the pool alone. She stared at the water, expecting to see the moon, but saw only her own face. She frowned, then turned to leave. But just before she stepped away, a single ripple crossed the surface, not from wind, not from stone, but as if something beneath had moved gently. And in the water, for the briefest of moments, she saw the outline of a girl, sitting, smiling, a face she didn't recognize, but felt, somehow, that she had always known. No one remembered her, not her face, not her voice, not even the shape of her shadow. Her father awoke one morning to find a pair of worn sandals by the door. He stared at them for a long time. They were too small to be his, too worn to be new. But when he tried to remember who they belonged to, there was only silence. He picked them up, turned them in his hands, felt the faint warmth in the soles, and wept, though he didn't know why. He buried them beneath the jackfruit tree, not with a ceremony, just quietly, gently, as if saying goodbye to something he could not name. At the schoolhouse, the children played a game where they held hands in a circle and sang a song no one had taught them, a tune with no words, just humming, sweet, sad, familiar. When asked where they had learned it, None could answer. It just came, one girl said, like a dream someone left behind. Lola Tindara passed away that week, peacefully, eyes open, a small smile on her lips. Clutched in her hand was a dried banana leaf, blank, but still folded with care. They burned it at her request, and as the smoke rose into the air, one child whispered, "It smells like memory." The terrace remained quiet. No more glowing, no more whispers. The moon rose and set like it always had, gentle and distant. The villagers stopped fearing the water, but none stepped into it. Not anymore. Because something had changed. Not in the sky, not in the earth, but in them. A gentleness returned, a slowness, as if each breath was now borrowed, as if each name remembered was a gift. And yet, there was a feeling, a quiet, aching feeling, like someone was missing from every photograph, from every story, from every seat beside the fire. A girl, a name, a smile that once warmed the dark. But when they tried to recall her, she slipped through thought like mist through fingers. Only the children seemed to come close. One evening, a boy stood by the edge of the pool and said, "There was someone here." A pause, then a frown. "I think I used to know her." But when he was asked who she was, he only shrugged. "I don't remember her name," he said, "but I think she remembered mine." She moved like mist, light, soundless, seen only at the edge of the eye, when someone turned too quickly, or when the fire flickered in just the right way. No one spoke to her, because no one knew she was there. But she was. She walked the narrow paths between houses, past crumbling stone walls and hanging laundry, past the well, the jackfruit tree, the silent church, the places she used to know. In her hands she carried a satchel, woven from old threads. Inside it, pieces, not objects, but echoes. A scarf that once belonged to a woman who had forgotten how to mourn. A torn songbook dropped by a teacher who forgot she once loved music. A single hairpin fallen beside a mat from a child who no longer remembered her mother's touch. She picked them up without bending, as if the wind passed and she was part of it, as if memory recognized her touch. In the early morning, when the fog rolled in thick, she'd be seen, just for a breath's length, standing by a doorstep, eyes downcast, leaving something behind. And when the family awoke, they would remember a name, a story, a laugh, a prayer once whispered in childhood. Not all of it, never all of it, but enough. Enough to breathe easier, enough to cry, enough to smile without knowing why. In the fields, the rice grew green again, not lush, not full, but honest, unburdened. The water flowed more freely. The terraces held warmth. The people no longer feared sleep because their dreams no longer vanished. One afternoon, a girl wandered too far into the woods. She slipped, cut her knee, sat and cried. And then a hand touched her shoulder. She looked up and saw someone, a girl, a little older, wearing a woven sash and a look of quiet calm. She smiled, wiped the child's tears, tied a piece of red thread around her wrist, and vanished into the trees. The girl never told anyone, but she kept the thread and wore it for years, until one day her own daughter asked, "Who gave you that?" She paused and smiled. "I don't remember," she said, "but I think she remembered me." The water no longer shimmered. It did not glow. It did not speak, but it watched. Every evening, the villagers climbed the path to the flooded terrace, not out of fear, not to pray, but to look, to remember. And every evening, they stood in silence by the edge, staring down, expecting perhaps to see themselves, but they didn't. The pool reflected the sky, the moon, the trees, but never the people. No matter how close they stood, how brightly the sun shone, or how still the night became, their faces never appeared. Only the water, still, smooth, empty. At first, it frightened them. How can water not reflect? But then, they began to understand. It was not that the water could no longer mirror. It was that something else was already being reflected. Something invisible, constant, present. A gratitude, a promise. Some swore they saw shapes, not clear, not sharp, but faint, like fingerprints on glass. A girl, kneeling, a thread floating on the surface, a hand reaching toward the sky, but only for a moment, then gone. Yet those who saw it never spoke of it with fear, only reverence, only silence. At the edge of the pool, a boy once asked, "Why can't I see myself?" His grandfather smiled, "Because someone else is remembering you first." Others came with offerings, not to ask, but to thank. A folded paper with a forgotten name written on it, a flower once picked by a child now grown, a bowl of warm rice lit not for death, but for memory. They left them by the water's edge. The offerings sank without a ripple, and the pool remained calm. Never empty, but never full, just enough. At night, when the clouds covered the sky and the moon should have disappeared, some still claimed to see it glowing faintly beneath the surface. But not round, not silver, not even a moon. Just a shape, soft, quiet, watching, waiting, not to take, but to witness. A girl with no name, no face, but a heart large enough to carry the remembering of many. And in the water that night, a child looked down and whispered, "I don't know who you are, but thank you for not forgetting me."
Years passed. The village changed, slowly, gently, like stone reshaped by water. Children grew, fields healed, the terraces breathed again. No one spoke of the forgetting anymore, not because it was gone, but because it had become part of the story, like seasons, like silence after prayer, like the way the moon returns even when no one watches. They still climbed the hill sometimes, not to look for reflections, but to sit, to listen, to feel something they couldn't name resting beneath the water's surface. On some nights, when the fog rolled in just right,
and the moon hovered full above the mountain curve, the pool would shimmer again, just briefly. And if you were quiet enough, still enough, you might hear it. Not a voice, not words, just breath. Slow, ancient, remembering. The elders began calling it the Buwanang Ala Ala, the memory moon. They taught the children not to fear it, but to respect it. Not to stare too long, not to take what could not be carried, and to offer sorrow when joy became too heavy. One girl, barely 7, once asked her mother, "Will the moon ever drink again?" Her mother smiled, held her close, and said, "It never stopped." Because that's the secret the village had come to know. The moon always drinks, not with greed, but with grace. Not to punish, but to help us forget what we were never meant to carry alone. And somewhere beyond mist and stone, beneath terraces carved by ancestors and prayers, a presence still kneels by the water, collecting what others leave behind. A name once spoken in love, a lullaby lost in sleep, a tear shed for someone you almost forgot. She is still there, not seen, not known, but felt. And if you stand by the pool alone in the deep night and feel the urge to remember something you thought was lost, do not be afraid. Just listen, because the water may stir, the moon may ripple, and a whisper may rise like smoke from the surface. A voice that says, "You forgot, but I remembered for you."